Hello and welcome to Mentors Capital. As a platform, we aim to further student aspirations by giving practical insights around program selection, college evaluation, admission process review, and much, much more. We do this by connecting with expert mentors across the globe, and we feel that by understanding their decision-making process and the tricky, challenging situations that we face, we believe that an aspirant has plenty to learn and embrace in his or her personal context. All of this leading to success, whether you define it in your career or in your academic discipline that you've chosen. In today's interview, I welcome Sparsh Moondhra. And for the benefit of our viewers, Sparsh, maybe you could quickly do an introduction about yourself.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Sparsh Moondhra. I'm a 20-year-old, originally Indian student studying at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. I've lived in the US, Netherlands, India, and Dubai. And I am currently studying psychology at UCLA with a minor in disability studies. Professionally, I hope to pursue clinical psychology. Yeah, that's kind of my spiel.
Okay, so Sparsh, you're in your final year of your undergraduate program, but you're back in India. So I guess in these times, it's most pertinent to ask about the effect of Corona on your academics. So maybe you could tell us how you coped with Corona.
Yeah, of course. It's actually my third year, so it's not my last year yet. I have 2 more years to go,
Oh, okay,
fortunately.
okay.
And in terms of Corona, obviously everything's moved online. Back in March, I had to immediately fly home to Dubai.
Right.
And since then, because it's been online, because of the time difference, everything's been in the middle of the night. And so the first thing that happened was that my sleep schedule completely flipped. I was sleeping at 5 a.m., waking up at 3 p.m. And that was obviously challenging to deal with.
Sure.
Even in terms of just education in an online format, it's challenging because you don't have that social aspect. We're going to all these universities to get information and knowledge from not only the professors that are imparting knowledge even on a screen, but even just from our classmates, our peers, other faculty, which is something that we're losing out on. Even in terms of extracurriculars, there's so much that's always going on campus that you just can't access through a computer screen, which is kind of sad, but it is what it is, and we're working with what we got.
What's the one activity that you missed the most?
I think the one activity that I missed the most would probably be swimming at UCLA's recreation center. I know swimming is something that you could possibly do anywhere,
Yeah.
but UCLA's rec center was just one of my favorite places because it was always lively. It was always filled with UCLA students. There were always some athletics events going on. And that was one place that I really felt like school spirit was super alive, and I felt like I belonged somewhere.
Okay.
So that's probably something that I miss the most.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I think a lot of our viewers watching this interview are going to look at UCLA as probably one of their dream schools. And so here's how I'm going to go about this interview. I'm going to start right from your schooling days and try and trace your journey along the way and try and understand how is it that an aspirant or a student can manage to achieve a dream as lofty as getting into a UCLA or a Stanford. Yeah. So talk to us about schooling days, right? Was psychology always a subject that you preferred at school, or was that inclination something that happened later on in life?
Very honestly, until I was 16, so until 11th grade, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Arguably, I'm still figuring it out, but until 11th grade, I'd never been exposed to psychology. I was in the CBSE program at Delhi Public School, Gurgaon.
Right.
And so psychology as a subject only gets introduced in 11th grade. Before then, all I knew was that, and no offense to all the math lovers out there, but that math is not my cup of tea. So that's what I knew that I'm not going to end up doing. And then I actually moved to the Netherlands in 11th grade. And
Okay.
so I moved from a CBSE to an IB curriculum at
Right.
the American School of The Hague.
Right.
And that's where one of the subjects I chose for my IB higher levels was psychology.
Mhm.
And I think I lucked out with a great teacher, and that honestly had such a big role to play in my interest in the field. She made me love the field. It was always super fascinating to me. And it was a very difficult subject because it was so new. We'd never done anything like it. But yeah, that's how I got introduced to psychology. And then the more and more I read about it, the more I wrote about it. I thought that this is kind of interesting. This is something I would want to see myself doing.
Okay. So let's say that a student comes up to you and says, "Okay, I'm in grade 11. I'm considering my options right now, but I want to understand psychology better." So how would you explain psychology in layman terms? How would you explain what the subject is about and what would be possibly prospects after studying psychology? How would you do that?
I think something that I personally think is amazing about studying psychology, especially at an undergrad level, is that there's so much you can do with it.
Mhm.
Because psychology at the core of it is just about, on one level, understanding and predicting human behavior. Like that's something, it's understanding social interactions, it's understanding your own self. And that's something everyone could benefit from. In terms of professionals, in terms of a profession out of that field, human behavior is at the heart of every single profession out there. So if you do psychology at an undergrad level, you could go into everything ranging from law as a profession to clinical psychology, which tends to be the most popular and commonly known one, to marketing, HR, forensics, anything that involves any sort of human behavior, you could specialize in it.
Right. Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said psychology is about human behavior. And my personal favorite way of describing psychology is that it's one of those subjects which help make sense of life around you. Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Yes.
mean, whether it's your behavior or the other person's, I think that's something that happens if you understand psychology. Um, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned that you changed schools, right? You did
Mhm.
go from a CBSE school to an IB curriculum school. Do you think that change enabled you to explore psychology and the subjects that you decided to study later on? Do you think the IB curriculum helped you with that? And how is the CBSE curriculum then different?
Um, this probably isn't going to be the most politically correct answer, and I do apologize in advance for that. But personally, because I had, when I moved to the Netherlands, I still did 3 months of 11th grade in Gurgaon, and
Right.
then I moved after, like in June,
Yeah.
because our grades start in like March in India,
Mhm.
I think. And so I was exposed to CBSE psychology as well. And personally, that never resonated with me. I feel like moving to the IB gave me not only a different perspective on psychology as a subject, but on education overall. Because, and this is a very, very strong statement to make, but I honestly feel like I learned a lot more in the 2 years in IB, even though they were probably the hardest 2 years of my education. But I learned a lot more in those 2 years than I did in 11, 10 years in CBSE.
Why do
Just
you think that
because
happened?
like CBSE is a great curriculum, um, but I think it's a curriculum tailored to a very specific niche of students. And people like me who never felt like they benefited from a rote learning or an entirely theoretical perspective, that never worked for me. Outside of CBSE with IB, not only did I get the theoretical perspective, but I also got a very application based learning.
Hmm.
And so yes, like CBSE taught me the concepts, but I never knew how to apply any of them.
Okay.
And so essentially I didn't know what to do with all that knowledge.
Hmm.
But I think that's what changed for me in IB, which was also a challenge because I never knew how to, for instance, write a proper essay because CBSE didn't like, we were taught how to write letters and paragraphs and things like that, but we were never taught how to write a 5 structure essay, for instance.
Right.
And that's one of the most basic examples, but it's just little things that were very different, which I think really helped me in my journey. Yeah.
Wonderful. So you've done IB curriculum, and your energy and your uh, interest in psychology is now peaked. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
how did you decide which are the schools and colleges you would consider to pursue an undergraduate education?
So when I was in the Netherlands, I knew that I wanted to study abroad, but that doesn't go to, I was very happy to be able to study in the Netherlands as well. Like
Hmm,
Holland has great schools.
hmm,
But the only issue with that was that because I wanted to pursue clinical psychology to some extent at that point, I couldn't pursue clinical psychology in the Netherlands because of a language barrier, because you
hmm.
need to have known Dutch.
Yeah.
And so it was essentially between US, UK, Canada for me. Canada kind of got ruled out. I think it's a great place, but Canada got ruled out just because my parents they thought that it's like too far away, which doesn't make a lot of sense given that the US is equally far away. But that I got vetoed on that, so
Yeah.
I didn't have much of a say in that. That left me with the US and the UK. US, I had friends who'd been to different colleges, and UK, I have a lot of family there, so I used to keep visiting. So I'd seen a bunch of campuses already. So for me, in terms of psychology, the starting point in choosing colleges was just looking up a list of colleges, looking up the most cliche like ratings list, be it topuniversities.com or something like that. Going through that list, seeing what universities I've heard about, what universities offer. A lot of research obviously went into the initial selection process for universities. Um, for me, the main research points included, and I think this is something that not a lot of pay attention to, not a lot of people pay attention to, but what psychology courses were offered specifically and what specializations were offered in psychology.
Hmm.
Because a lot of schools don't offer a lot of specializations in psychology, versus also like a Bachelor of Arts versus Bachelor of Sciences. Because I know, for instance, I think Berkeley does a Bachelor of Sciences in psychology, and versus UCLA does a Bachelor of Arts in psychology, which was one of the factors as well. Because given that I knew to some extent that I wanted to go into clinical psychology, even though I was still figuring my way out, I knew that I don't want to go into a cognitive science or a pre-med route with psych, which is why a Bachelor of Science was not something that was tailored to me because that was more STEM oriented.
Okay.
And so that was one of the factors. Yeah, it was just a lot of research, a lot of location finding. Because for me personally, and people don't believe me when I say this, but weather was a factor as well. Because I'd lived in the Netherlands, I had had enough of the rain and the gloom and the lack of sunlight,
Yeah.
and it just didn't sit well with me. So I was like, if I have the option to choose between two great schools, one of which has better weather, I'd probably go with the one with better
One
weather.
with better weather.
Yeah. But weather was a factor that played a role after decisions had come in. So yeah, also visited campuses,
Right.
which played a huge role in selecting my schools to apply to. So I visited all the 5 schools that I applied to via UCAS in the UK,
Hmm,
and I visited all the West Coast schools that I applied to.
hmm.
So we just did kind of road trip down the West Coast for a week. And I think that made a huge difference because while you have all this information on the web and all of that, being in the campus and being in the city makes a difference because you can imagine whether or not you see yourself living there for the next 4 years, which is a great amount of time.
Could
Um,
you quickly tell us which are the exact schools that you applied to? Maybe
mhm.
I think our viewers can get a better idea of what the comparison kind of that you're trying to make.
Yeah, of course. So in the UK, I applied to University College London. I applied to King's College London. I applied to Exeter, Warwick,
Okay.
and Edinburgh.
Okay.
Um, and in the US, I applied to UCSD, UC Davis,
Right.
UC Santa Barbara,
Right.
UCLA Berkeley, and UT Austin, University of Michigan, University of Chicago, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and
That's
Ohio State University.
right.
Yes. I think that covers all of them.
It's a pretty big list, I should think.
Yeah, it was, I truly believed that I wasn't going to get into any college ever. And so I kept pushing to apply to more schools because I wanted more safety.
Why did you think that? Why did you feel that you didn't stand a chance? Was it on account of any particular reason, or was it just a sense of foreboding that you had for yourself?
I don't think there was any particular reason per se. It was just I was obviously very new to the process. At that point, I didn't feel like I was good enough to get into any of these schools because the pictures of all these schools are painted so
Yeah,
prettily
yeah,
that you never feel like you could be at one of those places and actually belong there.
yeah.
And then I guess one of the things that kind of hurt me in the process was, and not to take any names, but I spoke to, when I was starting the process and we were deciding whether or not to go with like a college counselor, for instance. I didn't end up going with one, just for reference, but I spoke to a college counselor in India via like a video call or something, and gave him a rundown of my profile. Um, give the person a rundown of my profile, and he gave me a list of schools that wasn't what I was envisioning, or that wasn't what my parents were envisioning. And the person was basically telling me that, oh, you should go a few tiers below your current list and things like that. And I was like, okay, well, he's a counselor, he probably knows what he's talking about. And I guess that made me think that, yeah, like I probably won't get in anywhere.
Right.
Which also goes to say that don't always listen to what others have to say. Like, do your own
You
research.
listen but don't believe, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, exactly. That's better articulated. Yeah.
Right. So here you are applying to so many schools in the US.
Mhm.
But I think you very neatly put the structure down for our viewers. The choice of a STEM versus a Bachelor in Arts. It also brings to my mind right now in today's political environment, given that that STEM programs tend to have an OPT, which gives you an extended stay in the US, time to find yourself a job. Was that ever a consideration in your mind that I'm going to do a Bachelor of Arts, and so I'm going to be rushed by the end of my course to relocate, might not find a job in the US, which is, I'm sure, something that you've been thinking about really hard. So how did you? I mean, did this thought come up, and how did you convince yourself?
Interestingly enough, that thought never came up when I was applying to the US.
Yeah.
Because at that point, all I was thinking was, I'm applying to great schools in the US and I'm going to study what I have a passion for and what I
Yeah.
really enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's where my thought process ended.
Yeah.
And then I think beginning of sophomore year of college, I was going to all these career fairs, talking to all these professionals, networking, the usual at college. And the more I spoke to international students, all I started hearing was like the words like OPT, CPT, and like I knew about all of that, but it never, because for me it was about, I'm studying what I really enjoy, and then I'm going to figure out a way to make that into a profession. But then I spoke to a lot of people and I realized that, yeah, like 3 years versus 1 year does make a difference. I'd have more time, I'd have more chances at the H-1B lottery. And so at a point I got very intimidated and panicked, and I was like, okay, I need to switch my major to a Bachelor of Science. Like, this is not going to work. I'm not going to get any job in the Bachelor of Arts.
Right.
And then so I started looking at majors that I could switch into solely because of the OPT situation, which in hindsight, like, not a great decision. Like, you should still continue studying what you want to. But I went to the Department of Psychology, and the Department of Psychology at UCLA has a Bachelor of Science degree, but it's for cognitive science.
Okay.
But it has some level of overlap with psychology courses as well, because it still comes under the Department of Psychology. So I switched into it and I was like, okay. And then I had all these new prerequisites to do. They were all physics, chemistry, math. And then there were a lot of linguistic courses and things of the sort. And I did a couple, and I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. I can do it. But then I think it was my third prerequisite, and I was just like, why am I doing this? I'm not enjoying it. I'm looking at it as just like courses I need to get out of the way. And that's not the point of being at college. That's not the point of paying so much for your education just to do courses that you're just doing for the sake of it. And even with a Bachelor of Science degree, a lot of the psychology courses that counted for the degree were more STEM oriented, obviously, and my interests were quite the opposite. So the courses that I wanted to do didn't count for my degree. So I was like, this is pointless. Why should I be doing courses that I don't want to do just for the additional 2 years? And I understand that the additional 2 years may mean different things to different people. But for me at that point, I was like, this is not what I envisioned my college education to look like.
Right.
And so I actually switched back to psychology the very next quarter. And my thought process was that if it's something that I'm truly passionate about, and if it's something that I'm good at, then I will figure out a way to make the 1 year work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, follow your passion. Don't worry about really long-term prospects. I guess if you're choosing a course in liberal arts, I think it should be a greater focus on what you're good at. And what you'd rather be what you're passionate about, and what you'd rather study, than worry about these externalities. Where, I mean, you never know. For all we know, this rule might just change in the coming year, right? By the time you graduate, maybe. So you never know. So you better. I think it's more education that's of importance than anything else.
Yeah.
All right.
I think. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. You were saying.
I think we briefly talked about this, but the concept of ikigai also came back to me. And it's that concept where you should pursue something that's at the intersection of what you're good at, what you enjoy, and what can sustain you.
Yeah.
And yes, the OPT situation falls into the what can sustain you.
Yeah.
But if it's something you're good at and you enjoy, you'll find a way to make it sustain you.
Okay, talk to us about clinical psychology, because the conversation is tending towards what you enjoy doing, and I think maybe you could throw more light on what exactly are the skills that go into becoming or pursuing a role in that profession. Yeah, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So logistically, speaking just in terms of logistics, education, all of that requirements, I might have cut out. Oh, okay.
No, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. So in terms of that, you essentially have to pursue, if you want to be a practicing clinical psychologist, you have to pursue a PhD after your undergrad.
Right.
So you could do a PhD, do a grad program, and then do a PhD as well.
Yeah.
But more often than not, because clinical psychology PhD programs tend to be 6 years, so people obviously tend to skip the additional year or two for grad school and go directly to PhD programs.
Yeah.
A lot of research goes into it. Research as in you are essentially in a PhD program, you're doing research for 6 years, right? Even at an undergrad level, you have to get involved with research very early on, because that is one of the biggest qualifications that you bring to the table as a PhD applicant. That's just in terms of logistics. Even in terms of pursuing a career in clinical psychology, there's lots of different ways you could go. For instance, you don't always have to do just a PhD. You can do depending on what kind of a clinical psychologist you aspire to be, you could do a PhD, you could do a PsyD, you can do something that's called an MFT, which is a Master's in Family Therapy, I believe.
Okay.
So there's different fields.
What was the second one you talked about? A PsyD?
So a PsyD is based, so a PhD is a Doctor of Philosophy.
That's right.
And a PsyD is a psychology doctorate, if I'm not mistaken. It's similar, but a PhD is something that you tend to need in most countries to be a practicing therapist, for instance. But some countries will accept a PsyD as an acceptable certification as well.
Okay.
So it just varies what specific audience you want to be catering to and what geographical location you're hoping to practice in.
Right. But how would you define what a clinical psychologist does?
So clinical psychologist essentially deals with, so clinical psychologist essentially deals with dealing with people in the most simple terms. And that could involve anything from dealing with developmental disorders in children, toddlers. That could involve dealing with emotional and social or behavioral problems in teenagers and adolescents, or that could involve, let's say, concerns with intimate relationships in adults and families, or that could obviously involve the aging population as well. So it really depends on, again, what audience you aspire to be catering to. And at that point, you're serving the needs of the people.
Yeah. So, but how do you know that you're ready to dedicate your life to a career that's going to be more about talking to people? How do you decide that that's what you're going to do? Because from what I understand, once you become a clinical psychologist, you'd be seeing patients through the day, multiple patients through the day, and it's going to be more of a conversations that you would have, and then recommendations that you probably make. But how do you know from the onset that that's something that you want to get into?
In fact, interestingly, initially when I was exploring clinical psychology, I spoke to some doctors, some clinical psychologists, and one of my biggest concerns as well about going into clinical psychology was that it is a very heavy field, such that because you spend all day talking to people, trying to help them, and a lot of these people are really struggling. And you sort of take all their struggles and sit with it. And so that is something that comes as a challenge for the field, but that's something I see as a privilege and an honor to be able to help these people through their struggles. In terms of dealing with dedicating your lifetime to people, it's just everyone aspires to help people in different ways. So even, for instance, people who go into medicine help people differently. Even people who go into the field of engineering are in an indirect way serving the needs of the people. I just saw this as my way of serving the needs of the people. And it's not something I see myself, it's not something I see as dedicating a lifetime to. It's something I just see as this is my way of contributing to being a part of a society.
Wow. Yes, indeed. I think, you rightly put this as a privilege because, to my understanding, psychology and therapy in India is still probably, just sort of picking up, I think, in terms of acceptance in society. But I genuinely do believe that, across the spectrum, like right from childhood all the way till adulthood and marriage and beyond that, I think a lot of us do face the need to speak to somebody and get that, get our head sorted out. And most times this tends to be a little informal, right? You just go sort of went to a friend or a colleague and maybe do that over a couple of drinks. But I don't think we view the profession very favorably yet, or at least value it as much as we should. Right? So it's a brave choice. Absolutely. So let me circle back to another interesting thing that you talked about. You said you visited schools, right? when you were deciding which colleges to join. So maybe you could, because this is an opportunity that very of us rarely get. The chance to visit multiple campuses and then compare, the experience of having been there. So which campuses did you visit, let's say in the US, and how would you compare them, and how did they stack up, and how did they eventually help you decide, on UCLA?
Of course. So just as a heads up, in terms of the different departments and the different specifics of the schools that I was given on campus tours, I probably don't remember them anymore.
Yeah.
I just remember kind of an overview of what my takeaway from that campus visit was.
Yeah.
So in the US, I visited Stanford, Berkeley, University of San Diego, Santa Barbara, and UCLA and UC Davis.
Okay.
And so I'll just kind of start from the top. Bold choice, but so right off the bat, Stanford's a gorgeous campus. Obviously, it's one of the prettiest university campuses there exists today.
And
But
brains.
yes, but I personally, in terms of the atmosphere of the campus and the kind of the campus guides and the people that we sort of met along the way, spoke to along the way, and just for lack of a better term, but this captures it perfectly, the vibe of the campus was not something that I envisioned myself enjoying for the next 4 years. That's not to say that it wasn't a gorgeous campus. It's obviously a great place to be. It's Stanford for a reason. But for me, I personally felt like it was too cutthroat an environment for me to be happy in. Yeah, I mean, interesting choice. And I actually didn't end up applying to Stanford after that.
Okay.
Because like obviously Stanford's a great school, but I didn't want to apply to it just because it's Stanford. Because at the end of the day, as a place, it wasn't my favorite. It wasn't some place to myself for the next 4 years. So I complicate my decision by applying to a school just because it's one of the best schools in the world, And then in terms of Berkeley, sorry, go ahead.
No, I say in all fairness, you're studying to become a psychologist. So, I mean, listening to your own, your own self when making that choice, I think was equally important. So, I quite understand that.
Yeah, I do. People have called me just outright crazy for that decision. My own mom tells me that, but it's just like, if in the very unlikely event that, let's say, I had gotten in, then it would have complicated my decision, because at that point, like at the end of the day, I didn't enjoy the place, but I would still obviously be weighing the decision because it's Stanford. And I guess I didn't want to be in that position. You could probably argue that it was just me sort of being a coward in not applying. My mom says that. But yeah, it is what it is, and it all turned out for the great. So yeah.
Absolutely.
In terms of UC San Diego, great campus, I think it was by the sea, it was very pretty. But UC San Diego was one of my top choices, but it wasn't like at the top of the list, just because there was absolutely nothing that put me off about it, or that I was concerned about, but it just didn't stand out to me either.
I'm trying to understand this. So what were you looking for that would, let's say, give you a wow? Like, could you tell me one thing that would maybe, let's say you'd seen that at San Diego or at Stanford, you'd be like, yes, this is the place I want to study. Is there any one thing as an example that you could give us?
I think Honestly, I probably wouldn't be able to pick out just one thing. It was, and this sounds really stupid when I say it out loud, but it was honestly how I felt being at the campus, how I felt talking to the campus guides, talking to the Department of Psychology, because we went into places where we could. We went into the Department of Psychology, spoke to them about their courses, and obviously in that moment, maybe 3 years ago, I probably had a few factors that I was focusing on. But in hindsight, overall, it was just about whether or not I saw myself being in that environment, talking to those people, talking to that faculty, taking classes from those faculty. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Any interesting any interesting vibes that you would want to share about these campuses you visited? So you said, okay, let's do this. Let's make this interesting, right?
Mhm.
So let's do this like a rapid fire. I'm gonna let's pick these colleges one at a time, and maybe you could
Yeah.
adjectify them. So I already have Stanford. I already have Cutthroat. So what's it gonna be for San Diego?
Just kind of dead.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's just
Okay.
dead.
A little dead. Okay. Needs to be more lively. All right.
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. How about Berkeley?
People are too sad. People were just really sad. It was just really gloomy.
Gloomy,
Um,
like lack of energy.
yeah, a lack of energy, definitely. It might have just been the day that I visited, the weather just wasn't
Sure.
right.
Sure. I
Um,
mean, just as a disclaimer to all our viewers, these are personal views. These are
yes, of
on
course.
that given day. I mean, so
Yeah.
don't hold her up
And
against that.
I'm obviously very biased now, so
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, okay, what else did you say you visited? Where else did you say you visited?
Santa Barbara, Davis, and UCLA.
Right. So what about Santa Barbara?
I honestly, I thought Santa Barbara is like, the people were so happy, the campus was so pretty, but my parents just wouldn't let me go to Santa Barbara.
Too happy.
Yeah, they were like, um, I, they were like, there's no way that you're gonna be studying here.
These people
I was
seem to
like,
have be having too much fun. I don't think you're gonna end up studying here.
exactly. Um,
Yeah, we're
yes,
back.
sorry, I think I cut out there.
Right. What are we left with? Are we down to UCLA now?
Davis and UCLA.
Yeah, Davis. Yeah. What about California, Davis?
Davis actually, in terms of psychology and in terms of the people, was very nice.
Hmm.
But it's just I I feel like my views are very strong now because of how biased they are. But Davis was very just agriculture. Like it was just agriculture in terms of, I don't know how to phrase this.
Wait, let me rewind this. Did you say agriculture?
Yes, exactly. It's okay.
Explain that, please.
Because one of the most common, I think, majors that people go to Davis for is agriculture related.
Okay.
I don't remember what the name of the major is.
Okay.
And they generally take a lot of pride in how green and agriculture focused their campus is.
Right.
Um, and it was just, there were like, um, if I remember correctly, there were a lot of like a very strong portion of their campus tour was dedicated to describing the
Agriculture.
agriculture around us. And I thought it was a great place, but just as a campus, in terms of its infrastructure, I wasn't the biggest fan because it was
Okay.
just very plainly green. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think at the end of this interview, I think some of my viewers are gonna think of you as a prude. But
Yeah, I know.
we try to correct that along the way.
Yeah.
And finally you're at UCLA and
Yes.
what was the vibe like?
Obviously, I loved it. I think UCLA for me was also that, not except San Diego and Santa Barbara to some extent, UCLA gave me the experience of being in a city as well.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that became a factor when I was choosing which school to go to. Just
Not a university town, not a, shouldn't be a separated, segregated university town, but rather be in the middle of the city.
yeah.
So, fair enough.
I do think that university towns in themselves are great places to be because it's a place dedicated to someone like yourself. But on some level, I felt that cuts down your exposure to, I don't want to say the real world, but the real world to some extent, because that place is your bubble.
Yeah.
Versus in LA, we are an open campus, but we're set in the heart of LA. So if we step outside for 10 minutes, we'd be at Santa Monica or any place.
Absolutely.
Which I thought was great. UCLA's campus in itself. So UCLA's campus is very hilly. I don't think a lot of people know that. And so I thought that was very interesting in terms of its infrastructure because we have one hill that's just all residential. And the other hill is our actual campus part with like all the classes and everything that go on there, which I thought was very interesting. The people were lovely to talk to. The weather, obviously, you really can't beat Southern California.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You're enjoying the summer, and every day is a trek because you end up going from one hill to the other. And I mean, I think you're describing quite favorably, I should say. But okay, so you mentioned city campus. So did you utilize the fact that it's a city campus? Did you utilize it that way? Did you do a lot of internships or interactions with the outside world, or were you was most of your time doing research within campus? Did you tell us about that?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of utilizing the campus as a place that you're living in, that I think I did a fair amount. I've seen a lot of LA, been not even just LA, I've seen a lot of California, which I think was really, really great because that travel exposure only enhances your experience overall for your undergraduate program. And in terms of internships, so I'm actually I'm on the board of a professional networking club dedicated only to psychology. So what we do is we help psychology and related majors, so that can be psychology, psychobiology, cognitive science. We help these people build professional skills and then actually put them to use. So that starts by building those skills and then bringing in actual professionals to network and things like that. So initially being a member gave me exposure to talking to these professionals, building my skills initially. And then being on the board of this club has really helped me reach out to actual professionals in the area in California. And I think that's something that makes a huge difference because, for instance, for a field like, let's say theater and film, if I'm trying to bring in professionals for theater and film for some members who are interested in the field, LA is obviously the place to be for a field like that. And so really reaching out to these people, finding them through like LA directories, LinkedIn directories, and all of that. I think that's something that I would have missed out on had I been in a university town. Because the closest city to me would probably be a couple hours away. And so bringing in professionals, talking to professionals, just having, for instance, a coffee chat with someone you're hoping to intern with, or a coffee chat with a recruiter for that matter. It's so easy and accessible in a city that I thought was really great.
Okay. All right. So maybe I could backtrack at this juncture, and we talked about you deciding which countries to apply. You told us about how you evaluated countries, and then and then we went on to assign objectives to each college, didn't we? But what we haven't talked about is you've applied to some of the top schools in the US and in UK. what really, and I'm sure you got through a lot of those, schools that you applied to. But what do you think was a key factor towards, getting admission, right? Was it a particular, was it your academics, or was it your extracurriculars, or things that you do outside of school that helped you get into these schools, or was it just the personal essays that you wrote? What do you think made that big difference?
I actually think that when students like ourselves are applying to all of these universities, more often than not, everyone around you is going to have similar grades, similar GPA, similar extracurriculars, similar volunteering experiences, and all of that part.
Sure, sure.
So I really do think that two things that set you apart would be, one, your personal essay. And that's because that's your only sort of piece of paper, or that's your only chance at giving them a taste of your personality and what you bring to the table.
Right.
And everyone says this, but it is cliche, but it's true in that that's your only place to show how you're different from everyone else in the same pool as you. And the other thing, I truly think this makes a difference, is how you perceive how you're going to benefit from the university, like how the university can serve your needs. That goes to say that in those essays, which the prompt is something like, why this XYZ school? I think that makes a huge difference, because a lot of people apply to all of these schools because they're XYZ school. But really making a case for why you would benefit from their resources and their opportunities makes a huge difference.
Right. Right. Makes sense. So make sure that you personalize it both for yourself and for the school
Yes.
that you're applying to, in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um, okay, let's make this a little more interesting. I have a rapid fire round if you're up for it. So here's how we do this. I have a couple of casual questions, very informal types that I'm going to throw at you, and I'd like you to come up with the most interesting of answers. Are you ready? Okay. Yes.
I said sounds good.
Okay. Perfect. Favorite spot on campus?
Kirchhoff Coffee House. They have these reclining lounge chairs that you can just go, and they have it's a massage chair built into it.
Wow.
You never get it. There's 3 of them and they're always taken, but if you do, that's the best place to be on campus.
Amazing. Get yourself on one of those massage chairs. Okay. Your favorite activity on campus?
I think I mentioned this briefly, but swimming at UCLA's recreation center.
You did. Okay. One unique holiday experience you've had in California, or in LA, or in the US?
So for one of my clubs, we had like a retreat, and we were going to this place called Big Bear, which is a skiing location in California. And it started raining, or it started it was like hailing.
Right.
And we were on way up to the hill, and then we got to the checkpoint, and they told us that they won't allow you to go further without snow chains on your tires. And we're all a group of international students. None of us have ever put snow chains before. We barely knew what they are. But then we went all the way down to the closest like Walmart, bought snow chains worth $300, struggled with putting them on, and then we put them on, got back to the checkpoint, and they were like, oh, you don't need them anymore. You can take them off and go up. And we were like, we barely know how to put them on. We don't know how to take them off. But basically a 2-hour journey turned into a 6-hour journey. And I think that was my most unexpected expedition or exposure.
Okay. What was what has been the funniest moment in class all this time you spent in LA?
I think, wow, I really wouldn't be able to think of one funny moment. But being in lecture halls full of 400 people, So much stuff happens constantly. Like people, for instance, people would be browsing on their laptop for the most random stuff. Like someone could be looking for furniture in class, someone could be watching a music video, someone could, I can't come up with anything interesting enough. But honestly, with 400 people in the same room for like 2 hours, a lot of stuff keeps happening.
I don't think there's only one bizarre thing that could
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Actually, something that comes to mind is we had a fire alarm go off in one of our lecture halls, and we
Yeah.
were doing a midterm. And so we're like writing this exam, and a fire alarm goes off, and the professor, instead of like pausing the midterm or like halting it or doing anything of the sort, we were genuinely escorted outside to like a random part of campus, like it was just grass, and everyone was made to sit down there and finish the midterm. And
Oh,
people are like crossing us, looking at us, trying to figure out what's going on. And we're just sitting in the middle of campus trying to finish a midterm on the grass, which is pretty funny.
wow. That does sound like old school. I mean, sitting under a
Yeah,
tree and studying.
exactly. Except you're with 400 people under 5 trees. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. What do you think are the values at UCLA? What is the most sort of resounding values that UCLA stands for?
I think something that UCLA is very big on is independence and freedom.
Yeah.
And another thing is probably solidarity.
Right.
Because as a campus, there's a lot of school spirit, there's a lot of school pride, and there's a lot of unity in that. And being in LA, being in Southern California, I think UCLA is very, very big on um, be it freedom of speech, be it freedom of thought. You're allowed to have your own perspective and not be judged for it.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Okay, any professor whom you shared a special bond or really liked through your course of study?
I've actually been very, very lucky with psychology professors at UCLA. They're all so knowledgeable, so nice, so approachable, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is one of the best qualities. I think the most interesting professor experience that I've had has been I took this class on intimate relationships
Yeah.
under the Department of Psychology,
Okay.
and the professor was the most approachable, funny, and obviously very, very knowledgeable. And because it was a class on intimate relationships, we were learning, the whole class was about relationships essentially. And so it's a room full of in terms of traditional students, it's a room full of like um 20-year-olds or 20 something year olds. um and so half of our lectures used to be turned into like couples therapy sessions in public. It's like 400 people sitting in class, and then this one person raises their hand about a question, and it turns into a personal story. And the professor would actually, like, the course was structured in a way that um, all of our learnings and topics were meant to be applicable or meant to be relatable to everyone in the room, which I thought was so great. And so that professor honestly had a bond with every single one of his students because
Could you
everyone
name
spoke to him.
could you tell us a little more about the
Um,
professor?
so his name is Professor Bradbury,
Okay.
and he also he's a part of the research lab at UCLA that's called Marriage and Relationships. And his lab is one of the most sought after labs at UCLA for students to get a research assistant position, for instance.
Right.
Because not only are you getting research experience, but you're getting it with an amazing professor and with a field that's so applicable and relatable to nearly every 20 something year old.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was really interesting because he himself is a clinical psychologist, and his wife is actually a marriage and family therapist, but he's the one like teaching that as a course, which is always really interesting.
Absolutely. Um, Okay, I have a question. I'm not sure if you're going to appreciate the question, but if you were given the choice to relocate your campus and take it to a place of your choice, a city of your choice, where would you go?
Does it have to be in the US
No, it
or?
could be anywhere. I mean, anywhere under the sun?
I think some place that I would love to take it to would be maybe Australia, actually.
Eh?
Um,
That's a
like
new entry into our conversation. We haven't talked about Australia at all.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've never been to Australia. I've always wanted to visit.
Uh-huh.
And I think Australia as a place has um, it's very unexplored, relatively unexplored.
So let me get this straight. You've never been to Australia, but you still want to take your entire campus there.
Because it's a relatively unexplored place, and
Right.
I've everything that I've read or seen online about Australia as a country, I think it would be could be a fun could be
Yeah,
an
I mean,
exciting choice.
it sounds less. It sounds less of an academic program and more of an adventure that you're going there for.
I mean, if I'm moving my campus anywhere.
It better be an adventure. Yeah. Okay. I think that. Yes. Um, all right. So I think that brings us to the end of this interview. I think we've heard you on multiple counts. You talked about your undergraduate disciplines. You talked about colleges and schools. We talked about career prospects. Which I found frankly quite interesting. And you did mention that you want to pursue a doctorate. And you know, I take this opportunity to want to wish you the very best from the entire team at Mentors Capital and everybody.
Thank
Every one
you.
of us mentors who's listening to you right now. So wish you the very best, Sparsh,
Thank
and
you.
we hope that we keep seeing you here. I think we could do with with this energy that you bring onto the table, this vibrant
Thank
energy.
you.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, Sparsh. You have a great day and catch you later.